The European Union might be a complex organization to understand due to its bureaucracy, several institutions, and endless agencies. However, when it comes to the decision-making process, the main EU institutions involved are the European Parliament, the European Council, the Council of the European Union, and the European Commission. Hello, my name is Benedicta Giunta. I was born and raised in Italy, and my parents are from Ghana. Today, from the four institutions I've mentioned, I want to talk to you about the European Commission, an institution that may sound familiar to you. But how does the Commission actually work? The European Commission is the EU institution that has the monopoly on legislative initiative and is principal executive body of the European Union. This institution is formed by 27 commissioners, one for each member state. In order to defend the general interest of the Union, the commissioners must be completely independent in the performance of the duty. Out of the 27 commissioners, one is the president of the Commission, 8 are vice presidents, one of them being the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policies. And the rest are 18 commissioners who are responsible for a portfolio. There is one commissioner for agriculture, for economy, for budget, and so on. What is the work of the European Commission? When it comes to strategy and policy, the Commission, along with the other main EU institutions, develops overall strategies and political direction of the EU. In fact, every 5 years, at the beginning of a new Commission term, the President of the Commission also determines the political priorities of its upcoming term of office. Then, these priorities turn into concrete action on a yearly basis through an annual work program. Concerning the development and implementation of the policies, the Commission does so by proposing laws to the European Parliament and Council of the European Union, who must agree on the text for it to become EU law. But the Commission cannot act in any area, only in those where it has competence, meaning where its member states are authorized to do so through the EU treaties they have signed. Besides that, the Commission is responsible for helping EU countries to implement EU legislations, and it also monitors whether EU laws are applied correctly. However, if the member states fail to implement EU laws, the Commission may start a formal infringement process against the country in question. That is why the Commission is referred as the guardian of the EU treaties. But not everything is translated into laws within the Commission. It also manages EU funding programs, drafts policies, and plans, proposes, and implements the EU budget. For this last issue, the Commission submits the draft budget to the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament for approval, and afterwards the Commission implements the budget. And regarding the role of the Commission beyond the EU, it must be highlighted that it plays a key role in designing of European development policy, delivering aid worldwide, and in negotiating agreement international development issues. There is still one thing to talk about, because all of this information may give the impression that the EU Commission is not accountable to anyone, but in fact it is. The Commission is accountable to the European Parliament by the EU treaties. Therefore, if the Parliament adopts a motion of censure against the Commission collectively, all of its members are required to resign. So, to sum up, you can see that the European Commission is one of the most important institutions of the EU, as it is the guardian of the EU treaties, and almost everything passes through its office for development or execution. However, with great powers comes great responsibility, and that is why the Commission is obliged to always act defending the general interest of the EU and not of any particular country. And for that, we have the European Parliament, who is always checking on the Commission. And now also you know a bit better on how the Commission works.